Welcome to the second episode of the fifth season of the fourth podcast, where we talk about the effects of drugs on culture and society, more specifically legalization and decriminalization.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
I implore each of you to be unyielding and inflexible in your opposition to drugs. Just say no.
Just say no! What's so hard about that?
Alright, so we're going to talk about making drugs legal. Should we legalize
Which drugs?
all drugs? All drugs. Should we make them
Alright.
all legal?
I think this is a deep topic, drugs in general, talking about pharmaceuticals, talking about recreational drugs, talking about hard drugs, right? So you've got obviously your over-the-counter drugs, typical aspirin, right? Typical whatnot. That's perfectly fine. That's cool. Now, obviously, you're referring to recreational and then hard drugs, right? Weed, crack, heroin.
Weed's definitely not a hard drug,
I was talking about Tylenol.
Oh, no, I mean, obviously, yeah, you're most likely referring to that, right?
So I see that you made the distinction between pharmaceuticals and hard drugs and recreationals. And I think it's important to make that distinction because a lot of the quote-unquote hard drugs that we're talking about originate from pharmaceutical companies. Like a lot of the opiates, cough syrups, these type of things.
Hallucinogens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All these things, they originate or they are actually distributed by pharmaceutical companies. So I think if you want to answer the question of how whether we should legalize all drugs or not, we want to look at what we're trying to solve first, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the problem that we're trying to solve? And we talked about in our last episode, we kind of talked about how the United States government played a part in the 80s crack epidemic and how they are basically responsible for the drug problem that we have in the United States nowadays. And what I'm hypothesizing, what I'm presenting is I think that if we decriminalize or legalize all drugs, it would solve the problem, or it would go a long ways to solving the problem of mass incarceration due to the use of drugs. And I think it would also help solve the opioid epidemic that's going on right now. And it would solve a whole bunch of other problems. So this is what I'm proposing. I just want to hear a resident doctor.
I'm not a doctor yet, but
soon.
So you brought forth many different tangents because legalizing drugs or decriminalizing them is a giant, ball of rubber bands per se, where you have to pluck each one out separately. So the opioid epidemic, as you brought forth, yes, we do have, for example, in Ohio, we have the opioid epidemic, right? That's raging even to this day. It's been going on for a few years. The issue with that is that, yes, while painkillers and opioids are prescribed, they get abused very easily, right? And they have that ability for their patients that are using them to constantly reuse them, right? So that's true. Perhaps physicians, we could do a better job not prescribing as many to a certain degree. I think that's a reasonable offer, a reasonable thing to say. At the same time, does legalization of all opioids offer a solution to the issue of the opioid epidemic?
Well, what do you think? Do you think that...
Specifically in regards to the opioid epidemic?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk specifically
Okay.
About opioids.
So if you were to legalize opioids, right? Hypothetically, if you were to legalize a drug that we know has a high rate of abuse, right?
And even
for individuals.
Overdose deaths.
Yes, and that's the reality, that we do have a bunch of individuals that are unfortunately overdosing on this drug. If we were to legalize it, for example, if me or you, we could just go into our local Walmart and just cop some, opioids, Like just straight up, just off of like
Just some-
like
yeah.
like Happy-Cop or Tylenol,
Just go
right?
pick up some
Or
Percocets,
ibuprofen. Do you think that would actually affect the overdose rate or the death rate in this drug? Because right now, currently, you have a bottleneck effect where physicians must prescribe this drug for it to get out to the public, correct? Now, let's say we remove this bottleneck effect, we take out the physicians, and now we just have a whole flood of opioids coming to the public directly, right? That doesn't necessarily stop individuals from obtaining and consuming this drug. Rather, most likely is going to increase the chance of that occurring, right? Because like I said, you just remove that bottleneck and you open it wide up, you release the floodgates. So the reality is, if you just look at it from that perspective, you're not actually going to decrease the rate of abuse, you're not actually going to decrease the rate of overdose, and you're not actually going to decrease the rate of deaths that are occurring from this drug. So that's just logically thinking about it from that perspective. I agree that pharmaceutical companies do play a massive role in the deaths that take place. There's no doubt, and they make billions of dollars, trillions of dollars off of this. And physicians, we do play a role in the sense that we prescribe these medications to individuals, perhaps without getting a proper psychological evaluation of these individuals before taking it.
I mean,
right?
sometimes that's motivated by pharmaceutical companies too, right?
Yeah, of course.
Like doctors will be incentivized to
Yes,
prescribe more opioids.
that's true. And I think medical ethics has to play a role in that. Like, we have to evaluate how we look at pharmaceutical companies and who we're taking our medications from, and we actually have to run our own. I understand that pharmaceutical companies have their own quote-unquote clinical trials and so on and so forth, but we have to be more humane in our approach to how we prescribe our medications to the public. But going back to your original question, if we legalize or decriminalize, or for example, allow for us as a general population, where the reality is the general population doesn't have the intelligence or the education to know exactly what they're putting into the body at all times, right? In terms of pharmaceuticals, that's the reality. Like, do me and you know all the side effects of Tylenol, for example, or aspirin? Do you know the effects on ibuprofen, for example? Like, if you were to take it with another drug, the drug-drug interactions that would occur. No, that's the truth, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just learning that material, and it's like, excuse my language. I'm not going to say anything. It's a lot. Like, it's a huge amount to learn. So to offer that to the general public, I think it would be reckless. I'm not trying to discredit your argument. I'm just saying it's reckless because the education is simply not there. If you were to offer a form of education through which people took it seriously, then perhaps you have an opening to decriminalization and legalization. Because I do recognize the issue of mass incarceration. I do recognize the issue of abuse by pharmaceutical companies and the negligence of physicians. But I don't believe, I wholeheartedly do not believe that decriminalization and legalization is the route to go. I'm not trying to destroy your argument. I just think there's.
But I don't think our argument was destroyed.
No. I think it's a rubber. It's a rubber ball. You have to carefully take it apart one by one.
Hey.
If you were talking about weed, for example, that's a different story, right? Because weed has different effects than opioids, and weed has different effects than heroin, for example.
So
right?
do we agree on decriminalizing marijuana, though?
What's your take on that?
Well, I think we should absolutely do it.
First of all, I don't think you should apologize. I mean, a Republican senator recently said, "I love the dialectic." We're all here for the dialectic, all right?
Yeah.
So that's the point of this. You want to go to marijuana or talk more about opioids?
I think I want to address one of the points that you brought
Okay.
up. I don't think I'm advocating for people to buy opioids from Walmart.
Yeah, of course. So if you decriminalize or legalize a drug, where would you see it coming from then, if not from physicians prescribing it?
Well, when I say legalize all drugs, I really mean decriminalize them.
Okay.
Because you see countries like Norway and
Portugal.
These countries have already decriminalized it, and we've seen that it works. It reduces the rate of incarcerations, and it reduces the rate of overdosing, and it overall helps. And the reasons for that is because what happens if you decriminalize all drugs? You're basically, if you want to look at it from the supply chain perspective, first of all, this drug trafficking does not become a problem anymore. because they're all legal. What's the point of trafficking it if it's illegal? So you're already eliminating hundreds and maybe even thousands of deaths by removing the problem of drug trafficking in the first place. Number two, people, when they do heroin and they do all these sort of like drugs, hard drugs, right, cocaine, and they overdose and they die, they don't have any place to go to, because if they go to the hospital, they'll end up in jail eventually. You can't go and seek help for these places. Another thing is like for heroin, for example, right? When you have a heroin addict, another problem with heroin addicts is that they get HIV a lot. Their HIV positivity rate is very high. And in countries that are more progressive than ours, the United States, like they have clinics, government-run clinics, where they actually dose them with safe doses of heroin and help them get off it.
Like a weaning process.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So like number one, I feel like there's so many positives to decriminalizing them, because you're reducing HIV infection rates, you're reducing overdose deaths. Sure, yes, people are gonna ingest things that they want to, like they can ingest whatever they want into their body. Like, bro, there's a girl that put Gorilla Glue in her hair. Like, there's no way we're gonna stop people from doing stuff like that. Like, it's gonna happen. Like, people are gonna put stuff into their bodies or on their bodies that like not supposed to be there. And I'm not saying drugs are a good thing. Like, what I'm saying is that if we decriminalize them, we can help a lot of people.
See, I think this needs to be seen in like a more holistic picture, where you don't just decriminalize drugs in a vacuum, but you look at it in terms of like, okay, like rethinking the medical field, which you might be a little bit more interested in. But okay, how does this relate to, for example, pharmaceutical companies not being incentivized to sell more opioids anymore, right? Another thing that this could help with is like, right, because if people have access to it for cheap at a rehabilitation center, they're not going to be making so much money off of it anymore. Also, you can include in the same like legislation or whatever, better healthcare in terms of mental health, right? A lot of people, they're prescribed opioids for various things that could maybe be resolved through therapy or through like
physical therapy and so on and so forth.
Well, even just mental therapy for some of them, right?
I mean, but opioids are prescribed for
painkillers, but
physical pain.
I mean, they also have antidepressants that people get hooked on.
And
also like Adderall, which is basically meth. It's what it is, right?
How do you know?
And it's,
How do you know?
I have approximate knowledge of many things. Adderall is prescribed to children. Like instead of prescribing these drugs to like, we need to do a complete overhaul. And like when it comes to like decriminalizing drugs, it comes hand in hand.
And ultimately, like Ibrahim said, it's about harm reduction. So, by doing that, first of all, people aren't going to be like, if you can go and get it from like a regulated source, you're going to have less chance of overdose of, on the black market, you'll find these things mixed in with other things.
Yeah, of course.
Like, I don't know about opioids specifically, but I know a lot of cocaine on the black market is mixed with fentanyl, right? And then you take care of like the whole trafficking problem, like you mentioned as well. So these are the benefits that I see, and I think they apply to every drug, whether it be marijuana or opioids or cocaine, meth. The point is not to have a country full of people who are like constantly high, but to have people who aren't harming themselves and have a better way, like without being incarcerated, that they can get off of these things as well if they want that.
So to clarify, the end goal is to, if individuals that are on these drugs, rather than harm them even more by putting them in jail or allowing for them to be incarcerated, rather we rehabilitate them, correct?
Right,
and get them to become.
And I mean, some people have an addiction. Some people just don't care and they want to keep doing it. They don't even want to get weaned off.
Yeah, no, of course.
And in that situation, you just see them as like, in business terminology, it's just you write them off. You say, but you don't make that a reason to harm them more, right? You don't go after them with like batons and stuff and beat them up for being an addict. You just let them live that out.
I mean, the reason that they're an addict in the first place is because of the United States government. When you're talking about like the crack epidemic, for example.
Right. In some cases, but some people also just get addicted because they're bored, right?
Yeah, I mean,
It's true,
they got money and they want to do stuff. So.
Like,
Look, like I mean, I know nicotine addicts, right? Who had no reason to get into it, but they just did, and now they're addicted, and they don't really care to be weaned off either. They like it
because they thought vaping was cool.
Because they thought vaping was cool. Yeah.
So, if I may, there's I think there's a point you brought up in regards to like generally you spoke about all drugs, right? Whether it be from weed all the way to like your heroin, your crack, your meth and whatnot. I think there's a spectrum,
Okay.
and I would argue that the dangers and harms to society that your meth and your crack and your heroin bring are greater than that of weed, for example. Right, and that's been thoroughly discussed. I mean, there's literature on it, there's research on it.
How do you how do you mean like specifically?
And it's in the sense that the side effects of such, right? For example, injecting a drug into an artery versus a vein, right? If you're administering a drug intravenously versus if you're taking weed, for example, which is what smoking, right?
Crack cocaine is also just
Yeah. I've seen it. I'm saying if you were to inject a drug, a drug that's given through IV, if you hit, an artery, for example, right?
Sure.
Individuals, a lot of times they don't have that knowledge to where they don't know where they're injecting, right?
Sure.
So if you inject it into an artery, we know the arteries go away from the heart, right? This is basic biology. You can cause necrosis in your fingers. Like these vessels in your pinky and in your your fourth, fifth digits will explode.
I believe you.
Like it's. I've seen images. Like I've seen it. Like it's bad.
I've seen it too.
It's just the knowledge. I understand the need to rehabilitate individuals, and I understand the need to lessen the repercussions. Like I don't want to throw someone into jail for 30 years because they carried an ounce of weed on them. You know what I'm saying?
Word, yeah.
I think that's unreasonable. And I know as it brings brought forth, that's part of like the injustice on part of the American, justice system, quote unquote justice system, right? However, I think there are some harms to society when it comes to certain drugs. The reality is, the fault is to a certain degree the pharmaceutical companies, physicians, so on and so forth. And I agree with rehabilitation. I think that's a route that needs to be looked at. I think that's a route that needs to be taken more seriously in regards to individuals that are doing hard drugs or even like weed or so on and so forth.
It shouldn't just be for celebrities, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. And I think tax dollars that are going to incarcerating individuals in public or private prisons, which are a business in and of themselves, right? You have private prisons. Yep. They should be going to rehab facilities that we know effectively work, and getting people off these drugs. But is legalization the answer? I still am not convinced. Like, I'm being honest with you. I agree with the fact that we should rehabilitate people. And I agree that, individuals that need help, maybe they went through a turbulent time in their life and they, for some reason, turned to, a drug to help get them off there or whatnot. And there's many reasons why people take drugs, right? There's a billion reasons, but I still don't find that convincing enough of an argument to say, let's go ahead and with a general broad brush, just say legalize everything. That's just because there's so many aspects to it. There's
So where exactly are you getting hung up? Like on the decriminalization or on the legalization? Like, do you think that there should?
Yeah, can you define decriminalization?
Sure. I mean, do you think that there should be a point where someone can go to jail at all for a drug offense, or? And what would that be like?
So that's a tough question because I'm not familiar with the laws regarding such currently. But let's say an individual, it would have to be a case by case basis, right?
Okay.
Like if an individual is dealing drugs, right? Like you got a guy that's he's been selling crack cocaine or he's been slinging heroin or whatnot, right? On the block, and he's just he's just going hard with it,
Man's just trying to hustle, man.
Yeah, he's trying to hustle, but at the same time, it's if you just look at it from a harm principle perspective, the detriment that he's bringing to his community I would say is greater than the benefit, right? And what if he's that person that you mentioned that he just doesn't want to go, like, he doesn't want to be rehabilitated. He thinks like, bro, I'm making like big bucks, bro. I'm making that cash money home. You know what I'm saying? I'm chilling. Like, I got racks on racks at home. Like I got nothing to do. You know, so like, I don't know if that individual. I'm not saying go ahead and toss him into jail for for a life sentence for that.
Sure.
But I think there has to be some repercussions to that.
But what's the difference between him and like a liquor shop owner?
I mean, liquor. If you're speaking from, I agree with you. From personally, I don't agree with alcohol. You know, the sale of the consumption of X, Y, and Z. But the legality in terms of the U.S. law is like, for whatever reason, liquor is legal. So like, for some reason, it doesn't take like the same.
I mean, there's a reason for it. It's because the alcohol, like they lobbied really hard.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
And they.
I mean, but that's not like a recent phenomenon. Like alcohol,
it's been happening.
It's just more ingrained into Western culture.
That's also true. And in my opinion, I actually think alcohol is worse than weed because
I mean,
alcoholism.
I don't think it's opinion. I think you can look at these things like objectively,
Yeah.
at least somewhat objectively.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the data's there.
someone who's high isn't gonna go and like beat his wife, right?
Yeah, he's just gonna be fried.
He's gonna be fried out of his mind, enjoying whatever he's watching. You know, stuck on the intro screen for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
A projection of something to or like
approximate knowledge.
Peripheral knowledge, more like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, alcohol is far more harmful, like, societally.
I would agree with you. Yeah.
But I don't think. Okay, so as for decriminalization versus legalization, there's different ways to define it. I think countries that have indulged in these policies also have different ways of defining them. For me, like when I'm speaking right now, I look at decriminalization like you can't go to jail for a drug offense. Okay, and legalization is more of like you have access to it.
Yeah, permissible to like sell it and so on. So have it on the streets.
Yeah, have it on the streets, or at least in like regulated clinics or something like that. But anybody can go and get it if they so want.
You actually mentioned something interesting about drug dealers. And so I'm gonna bring up a little counterpoint to that.
Yeah.
So you say like drug dealers should be convicted because they're bringing harm to their community, and I agree with you. I believe people, organizations, institutions, governments that bring harm to a group of people that are like living peacefully, I think that should be always persecuted, punished, whatever, discouraged, whatever you want to call it. But here's the thing. Let's take a look specifically at the crack epidemic, like we talked about in the last episode, which we did film a long time ago, record a long time ago.
Go ahead.
So just kind of like want to brush up on that. So y'all remember Rick Ross?
Yeah.
Yeah, who is he?
He's a ex-correctional officer.
No, I'm not talking about that Rick Ross. I'm not talking about Ricky Rose. I'm talking about
Rick Ross, the pilot?
Highway Rick Ross.
I honestly don't remember.
He is one of the most prolific drug dealers of
most
our
prolific
time.
Features on.
This most prolific features. It ends over there. So he was one of the most prolific drug dealers of all time, especially the crack.
Sorry about that. Most prolific features on Meek Mill albums. On Drake album.
Rick Ross is a funny guy, man.
Yeah.
Both Rick Rosses. Actually, Rick Ross got his name from Highway Rick Ross. Rick Ross, a correctional officer turned rapper, got his name from the crack dealer. So he actually helped perpetuate the crack epidemic of the 80s. He was one of the biggest crack cocaine dealers in the entire west coast of the United States. He would ship crack out everywhere. Like, he was like the Amazon of crack. Like, he was crazy. Like, his distribution was insane.
Okay.
And a couple of reasons, right? So where did he get his crack from?
Colombia.
Nicaragua.
Okay.
You know
Close
why?
enough.
You know why he got his crack from there? Because the United States CIA, under authorization from Ronald Reagan, supported the Contras who were trying to overthrow the leftist government in Nicaragua. They supported their crack cocaine sales, which made their way to the United States so that they could overthrow that government. And that fueled the crack epidemic. So if you're thinking about it, really, who was the originator of the harm to the community when the crack cocaine epidemic started? It would be the United States government.
No, of course. I mean, if you're looking specifically at the crack cocaine epidemic in the 80s, then yeah.
You mean you can?
Well, it's because you can apply the same to like the opioid epidemic that's going on right now, right? That has 100% to do. Well, what's the biggest like opium producer in the world?
Tell me, bro.
Close enough, right? Afghanistan, and that really was one of the major reasons for the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan. Is that the previous government had cut opium production to zero, and that could not be allowed to continue. And in fact, as soon as the U.S. got in there and overthrew that government, opium production went back up, which can be seen manifest itself in the opioid epidemic of today, because then they use those sales to fight, quote unquote Taliban, but usually it's just innocent people, right? And that all led to a big sale of opium that was trafficked through Pakistan and Iran, and eventually got on boats and made it to its way here. So
like I said, I would agree with decriminalization as you define it.
Okay.
Legalization is something that, as I mentioned, because of so many different aspects to it, that it's still kind of murky in the sense that there are a lot of things that have to be unraveled before you can act. Before a nation such as the United States can say, "Yeah, we're going to go ahead and just legalize everything straight off the bat." So I agree with decriminalization, but legalization, I think that's a massive topic. And like, if you don't provide all the necessary facets in regards to it, then it's tough.
So I hear what you're saying about, okay, decriminalization is okay, but legalization is murky. The reason that I'm personally pro legalization and not just decriminalization is because I think that if you decriminalize and don't go all the way to legalizing, that's what creates this weird limbo where people can't go to jail really for any drug related offense, which I feel is a good thing, but there's also no way to get it. So the black market really flourishes in that kind of setting. To me, for me, I'd rather just have like a regulated place that you can go and get the drugs, rather than just everybody know that they're not going to get.
You never mentioned that before.
Well, that's what we've been talking about.
that you would have a place where such distribution.
No, because anything legalized will be regulated, right? Like your water is regulated.
I mean, but when I brought the example of like copying it from Walmart, there was no discussion of that we're gonna have a regulated distribution.
I definitely don't want the privatization of the drug market, because we know what.
Hey, I invest in Walmart, but
oh man,
it's funny. I invested in Tesla, but now I'm making a big loss.
Oh shoot!
Elon Musk is working hard to bring his stuff back.
Oh, okay.
Just him by himself. He's in a
but he's on Mars right now, right?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. On the rocket that he built with his own 2 hands.
Why are Tesla fanboys like that?
You know that Elon Musk created SpaceX? Like, he built the rockets by himself. Yeah.
I promise you, somebody believes that. No, he made the plans for the rockets. He built the Tesla himself. It's all his idea.
Yeah. even like the Tesla autopilot. You think that it's a program? It's software? Nah, it's just Elon remotely driving your car.
He's using a remote control, got like 5 cars at once.
And he's doing it all while he's in a spaceship in Mars. Come on, man.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah, okay, right. Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, I don't know.
You mentioned just having a distribution site for these drugs. Okay, continue from there.
Well, right, but whether it be necessarily, regulation is regulation, right? Like I said, water is regulated, but you can pick it up from Walmart. I don't think I don't think that picking up drugs from Walmart is against legalization. Although, I mean, I know Iran doesn't allow that kind of stuff. You have to go to a rehabilitation center to get the drugs. But in whichever way it is, I think it's better than just decriminalization. That's my take on it, at least.
No, I definitely agree with you in terms of like having the black market flourish. Yeah, I never thought of it like that. That would definitely make sense. Yeah, because if you decriminalize it, that gives every incentive to the next Rick Ross to open up the new
Rose.
Man, yeah. It's I definitely agree with that. I don't know what you think, Ali. I don't know. Have you been swayed? Or
Sway in the morning? No, but yeah. I think it's definitely like an interesting argument. I think it's something that I personally have to look more into for sure. Like I definitely have to do like more research in regards to like.
I think we all do, right?
Yeah, like the educational aspects behind it. You know, the effects that we've seen. I know you guys mentioned a couple countries that have currently done such. And I'm assuming it's recently, correct?
In like the last 2 decades. Yeah.
Last 2 decades. Okay.
Yeah.
Then yeah,
in like our lifetimes for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I would definitely have to do a little bit more research in regards to like the benefits of it, so on and so forth. You know, how the infrastructure is set up regarding it. But I think the possibility is there. And like I said, I had originally agreed with like the concept of rehabilitation centers versus incarceration. So there's definitely room for rethinking the American infrastructure regarding criminalization and you know what they have in terms of illegal drugs and you know the classes of drugs as well. You know they have different classes in regards to certain drugs and how many years you quote unquote get in jail for having a certain drug on you. Yeah.
I mean, like, we also need to talk about like you mentioned, right? Like what the different classes of drugs and kind of like the effect that they have on your body and like what the greater effect of them are on society. Like you know, alcohol is you know really detrimental to society, but yet it's legal and it's widely accepted in American culture. While weed is still accepted in American culture, like especially recently, but people still get locked up for it. I mean, I guess it's a little bit of a longer topic.
Yeah, I think that's something we do need to discuss, but probably in the next episode, which will be wellness.
Definitely.
Yeah, and one last point.
Sure.
One of the things that like has made me very hesitant is the fact that we as a general public are very unaware of drug interactions, and that's why legalizing drugs in terms of, you know, allowing for people to kind of pick by themselves what they can take, it's very dangerous. And the the chemical interactions that occur like in your body, so if something occurs and we as a society have not properly studied it effectively, then a lot of people are going to get hurt. And so that's why I'm a little hesitant. It's just the education side of it, the resources given to research in regards to and so on and so forth. But I think it's a track that should be looked at and a path that should be studied.
Definitely.
Thank you all for tuning in again to the Fourth Podcast. Be sure to give us a follow on Instagram at thefourth.productions and Twitter at thefourth_prod, PROD. And be sure to tune in again next week when we will discuss the problem of drug legalization and decriminalization through the lens of wellness. As of now, we hope you have a great rest of your week.